Hi, I'm Jim Doobie along the wild and scenic Wekiva River. Welcome to another episode of Seminole County Safari. Florida's natural choice. Seminole County uses a slogan to identify itself by its natural beauty. And what better example do we have of this than its incredible waterways? Seminole County is framed on three sides by some very well-known and important waterways. The St. Johns, Wekiva, and Econolockhatchee rivers provide scenic views, a recreational resource for residents and visitors, and critical habitat for an abundance of wildlife. Over the next half hour, we'll explore these waterways, learn about their unique history, diverse ecology, and what we can do to help preserve and protect these important natural resources. Of all the waterways in Central Florida, perhaps none is better known or more important than the St. Johns River. This 310-mile-long river starts in Indian River County and flows through or on the borders of 12 counties before entering the Atlantic Ocean near Jacksonville. The river enters Seminole County east of the town of Chuliota and forms the eastern and northern boundary of the county. A good place to start when learning about Seminole County waterways is to look back at their history. We're joined now by Florida speaker, author, and just all-around Florida expert, Mr. Ed LaRue.
Very kind words. I hope I can live up to it.
Ed, we appreciate you joining us today to talk about Seminole County waterways. And I want to go back to the beginning. Well, I said the beginning of human settlement along the waterways. Who were the first folks to claim the Seminole County waterways as their neighborhood?
Be the Paleo Indians, the Timucuan, the Miami. They were here as long as 4, 6, 8,000 years ago. Over at Wendover in Titusville, they have remains that old. And they were here. We can see their middens, their mounds, all up and down the St. Johns. It was the Interstate 4 and Interstate 95 of their day, thousands of years ago. The Europeans came in the 1500s, but the early Indians have been here for years. They think that probably 12 to 14,000 Indians were here when the first European settlers came.
So 12 or 14,000 Indians here.
Spread throughout the state.
But I've walked along the rivers here, and I don't see buildings. And so, how do we know they were here?
Well, excavations. We know their arrowheads, their shells, their fish remains, bone remains, how they ate, their refuse they made into middens, and they had mounds to bury their dead. We have evidence of that. Some totem poles were discovered just north of Seminole County. Many people think the Seminoles were indigenous to Florida. They were not. They were part of the Creek Nation. They came in the 1700s. They were known as runaways in the Creek Nation, brave people that thought enough about their freedom to have the courage to move, and that's why they were so hardy and such an opposition to our armies during the wars. But the Seminoles came here in the 1700s. The Paleo Indians much earlier, but disease, slavery, all the things that the Europeans brought died out among these tribes. We have very little evidence left. The rivers were a way to get around. The forests were pretty thick. The St. Johns is 310 miles long with 3 basins to it, and starts west of Vero Beach and comes out, of course, into the Atlantic north of Jacksonville. But that was the main artery of commerce throughout the state.
What's the next kind of big milestone in history along our waterways?
Probably the advent of the European exploration would be, yes. Menendez supposedly came all the way down, the founder of St. Augustine, came all the way down the St. Johns and called it the Valdez. In the records in Spain, it's known as the Valdez. Supposedly, he came down as far as Lake Monroe. One of the early people who came was William Bartram in the 1760s, and that's when we were owned by the British, by England, from 1763 to 1783. They were in charge here, and they sent William Bartram of Philadelphia here, and he was here for years. meeting with the Indians, cow keeper up near Gainesville. And they called him Puggy, meaning flower gatherer, flower hunter, because he brought all these specimens back, these new specimens of flowers back up north to his father and to their investigation up there in their botanical place in Philadelphia. And he talks about the St. Johns River. He was all along it in the early days.
But before the roadways, they were using the waterways,
Oh, yeah.
correct? And you mentioned steamboats. Are there some prominent steamboats that
Absolutely.
work this area?
Absolutely. The steamboat era was started by Robert Fulton in New York with his Clermont. They were here as early as 1830s, but they really got going after the Civil War. This is when the Henrys came. Henry Flagler, Henry Plant. The Pico building in Sanford is a Plant Investment Company. Henry DeLand, Henry Sanford, all the Henrys came. After the Civil War, and the steamboat era lasted from 1880 to about 1920, but the heyday was in the 80s. They said in the 1880s there was no place you could be on the St. Johns, any part of it, without seeing a steamboat somewhere. Lake Monroe here in Sanford, Seminole County borders on part of it, was a huge destination because it's as far as the steamboats could go with their draft in the shallow lake. Monroe has a 11 feet is about it. But by the way, Harney and Jessup and Monroe are all named for famous people. Colonel Harney was in the 3rd Seminole Indian War in the 1850s. Thomas Jessup, is infamous because he took Osceola under a white flag of truce up at Fort Peyton up near St. Augustine. And he was a long-time military fellow, but he ruled the day because he never lived down the rest of his career. He took the Seminole chieftain, Osceola, under a white flag of truce. And so these two lakes in Seminole County, Jessup, if you look at a map, just about divides the county. It comes right down like a gourd, like a teardrop. And it's named for Thomas Jessup, the great Indian fighter, and William Harney Lake Harney's named for him. And of course, Lake Monroe for our 5th president, James Monroe, when we became a territory. So the waterways are huge here. We have a long history here, a long Spanish history. The French were in Florida, the British for 20 years, and tremendous history on the St. Johns. Wonderful river.
Just as they did historically, Seminole County's waterways play an important role in our communities today. They provide wildlife habitat, recreation, flood storage, and improved water quality. In order for our waterways to continue to provide these important functions, we need to understand the ecology of this diverse system. Today, joining me is Shannon Wetzel, Principal Environmental Scientist with our Watershed Management Division. And she's going to help us kind of identify some of the little pieces and parts that make this system work. Well, we're going to stop up here in a couple places and we'll maybe try some dip netting and see if we can find some of the little critters. All right, Shannon, you're going to show me the appropriate technique for bug sampling.
So in a good healthy system, we're looking for habitat, where these aquatic insects can actually live in the water. And a lot of these insects are what people are really familiar with, dragonflies that we see flying around. But the larval form of that dragonfly actually spends most of its life here in the waters. So that's a good type of aquatic insect we want to look for. But we look for habitat. So we look for those old snags or down trees in the water. We look for the vegetation. Old decaying leaf mats are great places these aquatic insects like to live.
Okay. All right, so what we got here? Well,
it's a little freshwater shrimp. They like that vegetation. That's where you... Oh, and a fish.
No, that's a bigger shrimp. That one's big enough to put on the grill there.
You might have to collect a few more.
All right, so what's their role in the ecosystem?
These are pretty common in freshwater rivers. Along the banks, we see a lot of these freshwater shrimp. They're in the vegetation along the banks, and they're eating up the detritus and breaking down pieces of leaves and things that float into the river. So they have a role just like everything else does in the river.
I would bet they're probably a pretty important food source for larger
Yes.
fish and so on.
Aquatic insects are essentially fish food.
Ah.
So that's why if you have a good healthy assemblage of aquatic insects, you usually have a good healthy assemblage of fish, and it works its way up the system.
Ah, I see.
That ecosystem is all interconnected.
What you got?
So, great. We found a water scorpion.
Ooh, scorpion, like sting scorpion?
It does not sting. The name's a lot worse than it actually is. This is a cool guy who lives up in the vegetation along the banks as well. But this is actually his breathing tube that has stuck up out of the water.
Like a snorkel.
Exactly, acts just like a snorkel. And then we found this great dragonfly larva. This is what I was saying, an adult dragonfly spends most of its lifetime in this form. And getting lots of different types of dragonflies is a good example or indication that this is a healthy river system.
Now, is that a vegetation eater, a predator?
This is actually the predator amongst aquatic insects. So this guy has a really cool mouth. I don't know if you can see that. He has a large mouth that actually pulls out
Wow.
like a big bucket.
Right.
And he can actually eat small fish, other insects. So this guy's definitely considered a predator amongst the aquatic insects.
And then again, serves as another step in the food chain.
Exactly. And then you can see this would just be a tasty treat for some larger fish.
No thanks. That's actually a turtle egg. Now, it shouldn't be floating in the water here because aquatic turtles don't lay their eggs in the water. They usually lay them up on the bank. They go up there and they dig a hole. So I don't know. It could have been, the birds and raccoons will dig it up. Maybe a bird dug it up and was carrying it and dropped it, or the turtle just accidentally laid it in the water. It does not look good. It's really dark. Usually they're a light color. I learned my lesson about cracking open a turtle egg to see what's inside when I cracked open one and it was rotten and exploded.
Well, I'm up for you trying.
Oh, no. Hey, speaking of turtles, got a little Florida softshell turtle.
Excellent.
You can see why they're called a soft shell. It's almost like a pancake. Really soft. Now this one's probably about a year old. They get really big. Females get much bigger than the males. You can see that. I don't know if you can see it on the camera or not, but there's a little snorkel of a snout there. What they do is they bury themselves in the sand, and then they have a really long, his neck is probably about that long. Really long neck that they'll stick out. They can snorkel up, take a breath. Shannon, come here, look. Up here on the bank. There's a lot of people, any snake near the water is a moccasin. That's not, that's a Florida water snake. Some people call them banded water snakes. And again, look at this oxbow, so full of diversity of insects and baby turtles and frogs and fish, young fish. That's what he's up here eating. And they vary a lot. As they get older, they can get almost solid black. And again, a lot of people mistake them for moccasins. Now, he's relying on his camouflage right now, or he thinks he's camouflaged. Will be nice. See if I can. Whoa, there he goes. Oh, look at that, look at that. Ow, yeah, see there. Now, some people would say that's aggressive. He's just being defensive. They'll strike like that. They will bite. He didn't bite me, but they will bite. Sometimes they'll release a musky odor out of their gland down here, the vent. He's calming down now. Oh, you can also see the head kind of flaring out into a triangle shape. That's another defense. Ooh, yeah, I can smell the musk now. But they'll spread their jaws out, gives them a triangle-shaped head, and a lot of people unfortunately think that if it's got a triangle-shaped head, it's venomous. All right, buddy, we'll let you go. Oh, wow, that's a warmouth sunfish. That's a very predatory. Let's look at that one.
Look at it.
Yeah, if I'm gonna.
See that big mouth on them? That's why they're called a warmouth sunfish. It's kind of like a bass. They go in and they open their mouth and suck in. You'd be sucking in those little minnows, and they sit down in the vegetation. They dart out and they open that big mouth and suck in small fish and aquatic insects. I know that the Econ's a really popular canoeing and kayaking destination. Most people putting in at the County Road 419 spot and then taking out up here at Snow Hill Road. It's about a 4-hour trip. But I think most of the people, they paddle down the river, they might see an alligator. They don't realize how much diversity exists off the beaten path.
Under the water, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Shannon, I appreciate you coming out today.
Oh, thanks.
I know it was a rough job, but somebody has to do it, right?
That's right.
So another tough day at work, huh, Shannon?
Yeah.
Well, you know, last week we were out on the Econ River. This week finds us here on the Wekiva. What's different about the Wekiva than the Econ?
A couple things. This is a really unique river. It's got a state designation of an outstanding Florida water body, but it also has a federal designation as a National Wild and Scenic River.
Okay, what does that mean?
So the National Wild and Scenic River System was established in 1968 by President Lyndon Johnson. So it's been around a while, but only a 1/4% of our nation's rivers actually qualify as or designated as a National Wild and Scenic River.
So how is the Wekiva, they're both the Wekiva and the Econ are outstanding Florida waters. The Wekiva is a wild and scenic river. How is it different biologically or ecologically than the Econ?
Well, Wekiva River is unique because it's spring-fed. It's got surface water or watershed runoff, as well as groundwater runoff that's coming from that second magnitude spring in Wekiva Springs. And it also gets runoff from Rock Springs Run, as well as Blackwater Creek.
This whole bottom here is covered with this long, is it called eelgrass?
Eelgrass.
Oh, and there's even a snail feeding on lots of snails feeding on it. Are they feeding on the grass or the algae growing on the grass?
They're most likely feeding on the algae that's growing on top of the eelgrass.
So being that the Wekiva is a spring-fed river and the Econ was more of a blackwater seepage, does that mean we'll have a different assemblage of plants and animals here?
Yeah, we definitely see different types of plants and animals in this system. A great example is the eelgrass that you mentioned before, the tape grass that's down in the river. Another is this water lettuce, which is actually an exotic plant. But all of them provide different habitat types for the critters or the aquatic bugs that we see in the water. Here's a great example of these water lettuce roots. You can see how feathery they are. Right. They provide refuge for quite a few bugs and insects, which the fish can eat. There's also...
I see some eggs up on, is that eggs up on, or back this way?
Right here. The cluster of eggs. This is the native apple snail. This is a good snail to have in the system. But those, if you see these eggs, which are kind of like pea-sized and light pink in color, you definitely want to keep those on the plants. Those are a good native snail.
There's an exotic or invasive snail?
There is an exotic invasive snail that we see along the St. Johns River as well.
The eggs are smaller and they're dark, like a darker pink?
Darker pink in color.
Okay, and I understand the exotic apple snail gets about the size of a tennis ball?
Much larger in size and will basically can decimate a lake or river of vegetation. They have healthy appetite. The water lettuce here is an exotic plant. As you can see, there's quite a bit of it, as well as other exotics throughout the river. And the exotic vegetation can just kind of overwhelm this river system. It's a constant battle by state biologists to keep it under control so that it can maintain some sort of recreational value for paddlers. But it's a real problem.
Mm-hmm. And you said recreational visitors. This river has been, I can remember as a child taking canoe trips on the Wekiva. It's been a real attraction, I guess the natural attraction for Central Florida for a lot of years.
It's definitely a jewel in Seminole County. So a lot of people come here. It's a very active place on the weekends.
And so you have that wild and scenic designation, I think, gives it a little bit of extra funding maybe from a federal level.
Funding and a lot of, like I mentioned before, there's partnerships that work together on the management plan. So everybody, all of the different agencies and partners and stakeholders in the river all work together to manage the river toward one goal, trying to maintain its outstanding values and free-flowing nature of the river, and to keep it open for future generations. That's one of the goals of a national and wild scenic river.
There's a couple of limpkins up there, Shannon.
Oh, I see them. There's 2 of them.
Yeah. And we talked about those are the ones that eat the mollusks, the apple snails and the mussels. Their beaks are I guess adapted to just splitting right through the shell, separating that shell and then cutting the mussel. Well, they're in the springtime when they're doing their mating calls at night, and they do it at night. It's really an eerie call.
So Jim, another one of the differences I've noticed between the Econ and the Wekiva is that the Wekiva doesn't seem to fluctuate in water level near as much as the Econ does.
Yeah, I think if you look at the water lines on the trees, the Wekiva looks like it fluctuates about 2 feet or so. And I think that's just the nature of the kind of river it is. That spring flow is pretty constant. From what I hear, it's about 48 million gallons a day, but it's not getting a lot of runoff and seepage like the Econ does. And I think that's what that big pulse of runoff when they have big rains down south is what makes that Econ stage up so quickly and fall quickly as well. Well, you can see a lot of little fish in the eelgrass here, like a nursery for the little fish. And we got spatterdock. Is that what this is here? I think.
Yep, spatterdock, eelgrass. It's a lot of good habitat down there. Lots of little hiding places for the smaller fish.
Shannon, I noticed some of the eelgrass in this area is covered with that filamentous algae. Is that a bad thing?
It could be. One of the major issues with the Wekiva River are excess nutrients in the water. And so nutrients act like food for the algae. So the more nutrients there are, the more algae growth and the more plant growth we see. And obviously that's a problem here in the river. So we're taking a pretty short paddle today, Jim. How long would it be if somebody's a little bit more adventurous?
Well, from the Boyle up at Wekiva Springs State Park to the St. John's is, I believe, 15 miles.
Oh, wow.
I'm thinking that would take you all day and then some. I think most people, they put in at Wekiva and they'll paddle up and then paddle back. Of course, you have the Wekiva Springs State Park. Not too far past that, you have a public launch area, the Wekiva Island. Then it's a long stretch until you get up to the county's park, Wilson's Landing, where we put in. You have Wilson's Landing, Wekiva Falls, and then Katie's Landing. And then after that, it's out to the St. Johns River. And if you're really energetic, you can go out there and turn left and go up to High Banks Marina and DeBerry.
So is there a paddle guide or anything in case people are wanting to paddle?
As part of the Wild and Scenic Rivers program, they have developed a paddle guide. And it gives you all the mileages from point A to point B, B to C, and then little highlights along the way.
Okay, great.
I say we go to the St. John.
I'm up for it. Let's go.
There's a real common bird for the area. That's an anhinga, sometimes called a snake bird because they'll swim half underwater with their head sticking out. That's a female. She's got the buff neck and breast. The males are black. But they actually swim underwater and they'll spear fish with their bill or their beak. You'll see them come up to the surface side of the fish speared and they'll flip it up in the air to get it turned around and swallow it head first.
So why do the birds that we see along the river, you always see them sunning themselves with their wings outstretched?
The anhingas and the cormorants do that. They lack the oil in their feathers that keeps them water resistant, so they'll be able to sink and swim through the water. So when they come out, they shake off and they stretch them out to dry their feathers out. Our waterways are so important that Seminole County has even established its own division to focus on the health and long-term sustainability of these important resources. We're joined now by the manager of that division, Kim Ornberg. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Jim.
Thanks for joining us. Can you share a little bit about why are our waterways so important?
Well, clean water is really critical to everyone's life. We need water to live. We need clean water, clean waterways for recreation. Clean waterways are an important part of our community as far as property values. It all ties in together to make this a very wonderful place to live.
Kim, what is the role of the Watershed Management Division?
Well, the Watershed Management Division was established to monitor our waterways and to protect and enhance the water quality and the ecosystems that make up our waterways.
And how do you go about doing that?
We go out and we actually, one of the biggest things that we do is educate the public about our waterways and what they can do to help protect and improve them. Additionally, we go out and we monitor the lakes and streams. We look at water chemistry, we look at biology, we look at bugs, we look at plants. And we also work with the residents to do restoration projects as part of our educational outreach.
Okay, so I guess it's really easy for the public to sit there and think, well, somebody else is taking care of that. But it really isn't just the division's job, it's everybody's job, isn't it?
Right, and that's the biggest part of our educational outreach, is to let people know that they are part of the solution, and it's up to them to help to protect and enhance our water bodies.
For those folks that don't even live near a waterway, what can they do to help?
Well, there's a lot of things that we can do in our own neighborhoods as far as to conserve water and to reduce nutrients by planting our landscape with Florida-friendly plants, following the 9 principles of Florida Yards and Neighborhoods, which includes putting the right plant in the right place, which helps to reduce the need for fertilizers or pesticides or herbicides as well. So that all reduces the amount of nutrients going into our groundwater or our stormwater systems. Also helps us to conserve water, which helps the Wekiva and our spring shed.
For our residents that are fortunate enough to live on a water body, is there anything they can do to help?
What they can do is to help minimize their impact to the waterway by establishing or creating a berm and swale at the edge of their property, as well as putting in a buffer area that includes native plants that help uptake the nutrients and runoff coming off their yards. They can also reduce the amount of fertilizer or eliminate fertilizer in their backyards, or they can focus, and everyone can focus on using slow-release fertilizers.
Kim, it's been a pleasure having you. You've given us a lot of great information. Thank you for joining us, and please thank your staff for everything they do on behalf of our waterways.
Well, Jim, thank you for inviting me and our staff. We really enjoyed participating in this and look forward to working with you in the future. And as we all know, the most important thing is that we protect and preserve our water bodies for our future generations.
Our waterways are not just important environmentally speaking, but are critical to our local economy and quality of life. They provide an avenue for a host of activities including fishing, water sports, wildlife watching, and entertainment. Residents and visitors to Seminole County can enjoy our waterways through a variety of opportunities. You can learn about the St. Johns River, its importance and history, with daily riverboat tours leaving out of the Sanford Marina. Airboat tours are available on Lake Jessup, and canoe kayak rentals are offered at several locations along the Wekiva and Yukon rivers. The waterway's natural beauty and these activities attract visitors from neighboring counties, other states, and even other parts of the world. All of these people enjoying the waterways spend money in our community, which adds up to millions of dollars a year in economic impact. So what's keeping you? Get off the couch, get unplugged, and come out and enjoy your Seminole County waterways. Until next time, I'm Jim Doobie.